Good afternoon, Chicagoland, and welcome to another edition of the Green Radio Network. Here on the Green Radio Network, we'll bring you a variety of green topics and the latest information on green technology and transportation. This program features environmental leaders throughout northern Indiana and the entire nation. The Green Radio Network is sponsored by NIRPC, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and the award-winning South Shore Clean Cities. Both entities are leaders in the environmental industry and work together to bring cleaner air and more sustainable living to northern Indiana. Now to introduce Carl Lissick, Executive Director of South Shore Clean Cities and the host of the show.
So thank you for that introduction. Today our guests are Mr. James Winters and Sarah Geinosky with the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission, NIRPC. James is the Regional Planner and Policy Analyst, and Sarah is the Geographic Information System, GIS Analyst. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here today.
Thank you for having us.
So how are you guys? Okay, so, what is, a lot of people know what NIRPC is. They work with so many communities, work throughout Lake Porter and LaPorte County. But what is a regional planner and policy analyst, James?
Well, my position actually straddles two very different missions.
Okay.
On the one hand, I am a freight planner, so I help accommodate and advocate for the movement of goods in, out, and throughout the region.
Okay.
Making sure that the interests of private businesses are represented in our transportation improvement plan and in how we prioritize transportation projects in Northwestern Indiana.
Sure. And Sarah, tell us a little bit about your job.
Okay, so as a GIS analyst, I use something, called GIS, and GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. And what GIS does is the best way to describe it is if you took like Photoshop and Excel and you merge them together and you created some hybrid Google Maps super program. And the idea is you can make maps with this program, you can analyze data that comes in many different forms, and by using those making those two powers combined, I can add a lot of value to the type of work NIRPC does by taking geographic information and displaying it or analyzing it in ways that are really important to our mission.
So as we go farther into this, James and Sarah, I know you talk about freight and we talk about congestion, we talk about the importance of clean air. How many railroads, how many bottlenecks do we have in northern Indiana?
Oh, that's a great question. In Northwestern Indiana, we move freight pretty well. In terms of railroads, for sure. Our biggest issue is getting it through the Chicago bottleneck.
I see.
And moving it through there. However, in Northwestern Indiana, our biggest issue is road congestion and making sure that we can move freight on the road, even though there are more obstacles to that. So for instance, and this is, I guess, is slightly different than what we were originally going to talk about, but it's an important issue to me, and it's an important issue to NIRPC. So, for instance, land use planning.
Sure.
So how we build and where we build has a direct impact on our transportation network. So if you, as a municipality or a county, don't regulate the way that people can build their houses, then they stack itty-bitty or big houses on big acres and go out, and they don't build sidewalks, and everybody's so far away from each other that you have to drive miles and miles just to buy a loaf of bread.
Sure.
And so what happens is these cars spend more time on the road, which isn't just an environmental issue. What I'm really trying to get across as a freight planner is that this is actually also an economic development issue.
Absolutely.
So if we have more cars on the road, if I have to get in my car every time I want to buy a loaf of bread, or every time I want to visit a friend, or every time I need to take my kid to school, then that means that the freight in the community, the people who manufacture goods, are getting to market slower, which costs more, which means less jobs in the long run.
Sure. So you're taking that information, you're working with Sarah to plot that on different. So what do we do with that information after you create this information, and how do we share it with our communities? How do we share it with business? How is that transformed into us all working together?
Well, that's actually a great point, because the other half of what I do, so I have this freight piece, and I can talk all day about freight, but the other half is I am a data resource for the region.
I see.
So if anybody in the region at any time wants to know anything, either demographically or statistically, or just you're looking to brainstorm ideas, they can pick up the phone and call me, and I'll help them through it.
I see.
Not even, it can be about freight issues because that's my other specialty, but literally anything at all. So we've worked with municipalities on, a small municipality in Northwestern Indiana wanted to renew their comprehensive plan. Mm-hmm. And so what we did was we sat down with them and we came up with, we outlined their general problems that they have with the community. We outlined their strengths, and we talked through a planning process that might work for them in sort of a larger, broad scope. But we've also done things like we had an educational association whose mission was to educate adults in the region who had not yet achieved their high school diploma.
I see.
So we were able to go and use existing data resources through the census and build out a spreadsheet of how many of these individuals live in Northwestern Indiana and where they live. And then once we know that, we could actually use Sarah's skills to map that spatially. So now we were able to give this educational association data that they need mm-hmm. to complete their mission, data that could help them complete it in a more efficient way, but also data that they could use in grant writing or in publishing their documents. And there's really no limit on what we can do for other people.
And that's very interesting because, again, we've worked with NIRPC, worked with many of our communities on trying to implement, obviously, alternative fuels. And, we don't want with electric charging stations to natural gas to propane, hydrogen potentially. We're looking at ways of not having all these stations, again, racked up on top of each other, but, making them publicly accessible, looking at ways of collaboration with public-private partnerships. And I think a lot of this information obviously does not get out to the communities that we all serve, that this is actually taking place, creating economic development in our area. So what are some of the obstacles that you guys run into, like getting good data to put on to these maps and to communicate and collaborate with the region?
Sure. Well, sometimes an organization, if they're looking at how to go about their business and how to help people, sometimes they need good data, but it's too technical. Mm-hmm. So they don't necessarily, like they may know a statistic, but they don't necessarily know the context of that statistic.
Sure.
And so speaking with someone who does this full time, like myself or Sarah, can help them get to the underlying meaning of this data. So just on the way over, I was reading a New York Times article about divorce rate in America. Mm-hmm. And so I'm getting married in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But so this comes up every once in a while with friends, hey, the divorce rate is 50%. What does that mean for you? You think you're going to make it? And maybe it's because I'm a statistician and maybe it's because I'm an optimist, but I don't accept that. That's mm-hmm. not actually accurate. If you look at these figures, you can see that the divorce rate was a measure of all the divorces in the country against all the marriages in the country. Uh-huh. And so they saw that they were about even, and someone somewhere said that's 50%. We've got a 50% divorce rate. But if you actually look at the figures and you look and understand how they got there, what they were doing was they were taking people's second and third marriages and counting that against people's first marriages. So if you re-look at those statistics, you'll see that actually people in their first marriages were lasting longer over time, and people who got their first divorce were more likely to have divorces later. So it's artificially inflating the divorce rate.
I see.
And so that's just one example. That's not necessarily something we look at NIRPC, mm-hmm. but that's one example of how if the data set's too technical, or if you don't necessarily have the data know-how, you may not understand what you're actually publishing. And that's something that we can help you out with.
So when you talk about that, James and Sarah, about how people would incorporate NIRPC into their equation, if you will. Mm-hmm. And again, like from an economic development perspective and, all the different things that are going on from green, smart city types of applications, us, coordinating the walking paths, the bike paths, and, just all the new things that are going on. But, we've seen a lot of brownfield site development. And I know there's an upcoming event here very shortly that NIRPC is planning on brownfield and brownfield redevelopment. I mean, basically, you have the capabilities of taking all this information and plotting it. And so how do you, where does all this training come from? So let's talk a little bit about your backgrounds.
Okay.
Sarah, where did you go to school at?
So I graduated with a bachelor's in geography from the University of Chicago. And in my experience in GIS is mostly picked up through internships and extra jobs I did when I was in college that kind of coordinated with my studies very well. But in general, a lot of it is just hands-on. The more you do it, the better you get at it and the more context you have to understand. And we were talking about obstacles earlier. And one of the obstacles is just not knowing where to go.
Sure. And
knowing who to ask. And the longer you do this, the better you get at knowing who you need to call up or what website you need to hunt down in order to figure this out.
How about you, James?
I think it all started in 5th grade. Mr. Hedke, he was constantly annoyed at me asking why all the time. And he told me that someday I was going to be a scientist. And I didn't quite make it to be a true scientist, but
which you are. You are definitely a scientist.
But
yes.
maybe a social scientist, statistician. But I went to school at the Northwest. Nope, that's not it. That's where I work. I went to school at the University of Illinois Chicago.
Sure. So you both grads from there, huh?
Oh no. So as much as we'd like to take ownership of U of Chicago, University of Illinois Chicago is
different campus.
Is not the Harvard of the Midwest. Okay. Sarah's got me beat there. But I went to the University of Illinois Chicago for my undergrad, which was urban and public affairs. And for my graduate degree, which was urban policy and planning.
I see.
And then I worked in. I had a variety of internships when I worked with the city of Chicago, and then I worked in southwestern Wisconsin as a associate planner for
Wonderful.
almost 3 years.
I remember you saying that. Yeah. Actually, first time I met you. So as we talk about all this collaboration, we talk about just our area, and we talk about road construction, we talk about freight planning. How are we collaborating with other states? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yes, I would love to. Actually, so NIRPC is an agreement with both southwestern Michigan, northeastern Illinois, including the Chicago metro area, and then southeastern Wisconsin with the Wing Spread Accord. And so we coordinate whenever we need to when we're cross-state plans. We all know each other. I know who to call up, say, hey, I need some data from your state because we're doing something that is relevant there. Specifically, we've actually worked with an organization called the Regional Alliance.
Okay.
And the Regional Alliance is trying to deal with the 21 counties of the greater Chicago metro region. So that includes our region here. And we are trying to coordinate a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different elements of the organization and the projects that are going on, so I can't speak to all of those. But specifically at NIRPC, we've helped them create a region-wide, so I mean greater region, not just our region, a region-wide asset map of what's going on in transportation. So it's an online map that the planners within our region, and then also economic development experts and any other people who are interested in this, can look at the different assets that we use to get around within the greater Chicago region. And the idea is that data coordination should help us make better decisions.
Sure. No, it's very interesting. And again, I think the name of that collaboration before, was associated with the Chicago Chamber of Commerce, and it's kind of a spinoff. It was a Tri-State Alliance, and now, they've got the new name. So, again, with all the collaboration that's going on, it's just a lot of this information, again, doesn't get into the general public. And I think that is a thing that, a lot of times we don't get credit for, we being our area of collaborating with communities, economic development, and really trying to coordinate the future of, our destiny. So, you're listening to the Green Radio Network on AM 1420 WIMS Radio. I'm your host, Carl Lissick. I'll be right back with NIRPC right after this.
There's nothing more important than spending time outdoors with your family. That's why it's so important to do whatever you can to keep our air clean. It's good for the environment and good for the health of your friends and family. Take a closer look at how poor quality is affecting our community. Across the 3 counties of Northwest Indiana, recent studies from the American Lung Association show that 9% of adults suffer from asthma, 4% live with chronic bronchitis, 38% have a form of cardiovascular disease, 10% of the children in Lake and LaPorte counties struggle with pediatric asthma. Now, the number of adults with asthma is nearly that of adults with diabetes. Consider how diabetics make adjustments to their diet in order to be as healthy as possible. Everyone can make adjustments to improve air quality and the quality of life for those who live with asthma and other lung diseases. Northwest Indiana, clean air, think green, breathe easy. A message from NIRPC.
Trying to perfect your backswing? Why not spend a relaxing day on the course while helping out a great cause? At the South Shore Clean Cities 4th Annual Clean Air Golf Outing, you can do just that. South Shore Clean Cities has been helping Indiana go green and reduce energy costs for over a decade. Come and sink a few balls at the Innsbrook Country Club in Maryville, Indiana on Tuesday, September 27th to help raise funds for a local nonprofit. Visit the SouthShoreCleanCities.org event webpage to register today and become part of the solution to pollution.
Welcome back to the Green Radio Network here on AM 1420 WIMS Radio. I'm your host, Carl Lissick of South Shore Clean Cities, here to bring you the latest information on green projects and topics across the nation. Our guests today are James and Sarah with the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission, and we were just talking about GIS and some of the things that are going on with GIS. Sarah, give us some examples of how GIS can work and how it can help businesses, communities with that.
Okay, so I think the most common request I get from outside organizations and communities is, can you make us a map of blah, blah, blah? And it helps a lot of other people because a lot of people don't have these capacity within their organization. And being able to provide a map really does, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well,
Sure.
A map can often clarify what your problem is and what your solution is in a way that just looking at the numbers doesn't. So a lot of times, especially in terms of environmental projects, we look at what's going on with our waterways, for example. So somebody might ask me, can you map the impaired waterways within the region? Or you talk about brownfields. IDEM actually has a database of where we have sites that need remediation.
Sure.
And so we keep that database and we're able to map it. And that can be really powerful to show where those sites where we need to focus our energies in that regard. And I've mapped, sometimes people ask, like, can I see a census map of where people live? That's really easy. We do that all the time. Can I see a map of where our railroads are? Or I'm trying to think of the weirdest request I've ever gotten, maybe. Oh, I actually can't think of it now, so I apologize. But
well, so like for instance, if you had an environmental organization who is looking to create a protected land, however, this environmental organization also had a educational component, and so let's say you wanted to buy 10 acres of wild area, or area that could be restored to a wild area, but you wanted to make sure it was within 2 miles of a large population of student-aged children. That's the kind of thing that GIS is really good at. It's a way of not just mapping data spatially, but also taking that data and analyzing it. So Sarah is a wizard at this, and she can take this data and she can lay out every single all the existing features of a parcel that you would need. So we need a 10-acre site of wildlife or of wildland, and then she can overlay on top of it student populations or the density of those populations, and then come away with 2 or 3 locations so that your organization can pinpoint and be more efficient in their research.
Wow.
Yeah, and
it's amazing.
It's a real time saver.
Yeah, I can imagine. And again, I think there's a couple projects that actually we're going to be working on in regards to alternative fuels and alternative energy. So we're really excited about the opportunity to work with both of you. So what are some good sources for data besides NIRPC? What are some other things that you would recommend maybe to other organizations that might be listening of other sources of data?
So there's a wide variety of data depending on what you're looking for. We at NIRPC use a lot of different sources. In particular, specifically, I use something called Indiana Map. It's published by, or it's a website that's run by both the Indiana GIS group as well as Indiana University Bloomington, and they put together this really terrific web map and database where you can download data that's geographic in nature, but also if you don't have any experience doing actual GIS, they have a great web map where you can add layers. So you can say, I want to know the poverty rate in this area, and you can add that layer to this map, and then you can print that map out yourself.
It's a pretty great tool. Every once in a while, I'll ask Sarah for a map, and she'll say, "Hey, that's on Indiana Map, dummy. Just look it up."
I don't think Sarah would say that to you, James.
You'd be surprised. She's terrible.
So, moving forward, as we were talking about freight planning, again, some of the changes that have gone on with NIRPC and the Transportation Planning Commission and things like this, I know that you're going to be heading up this new program. Talk a little bit about that, potentially how people could get involved, and how do people get a hold of both of you?
Great. Well, you can always call us. You can call us at the NIRPC office. Sarah has our phone number memorized. Because I don't.
219-763?
6060. That's it. Yeah.
6060. There you go. Huh?
Very good.
So you can always give us a call. Or you can email us. My email is jwinters@nirpc.org. And that's, you're safe to email me on just about everything. So you can email me about requesting data on any topic, or if you're interested in freight and in general, how freight moves in and throughout the region, or how land use affects transportation, you can email me. Also, it's important to note that if I don't have the answer, or if Sarah doesn't have the answer, we'll point you to someone who does.
Sure.
So, for instance, if you're really passionate about land use planning and you want to make sure we're developing in a sustainable way, you can email me and I'll get you in touch with Iman Ibrahim in our office, who's our land use planner. Or if it's more related to freight and the movement of goods and making sure that people aren't clogging up our roadways with trips that could be moved to walking or biking, then you can contact me about that, and I'd love to have that conversation.
And Sarah, what is your contact information?
You can email me at sgeinosky@nirpc.org, and I know that, so I'm going to spell that out because it's a little weird. That's SGEINOSKY@nirpc.org. You can also find this on the website, and there'll be actually a way to request our services if you need to on the website also. Or you could call me, or if you see me in a meeting, if you run into me, I'm really happy to help. We really like being able to do this.
I really admire, some of the changes that have gone on with NIRPC. I love the enthusiasm. I love the passion that both of you have for your profession, and just, some of the things that, things aren't normal anymore. I think, we've seen changes going on within our area because of some of the, changes that have happened at NIRPC and, some of the capabilities that NIRPC has. So where are we going to be 5 years from now? I mean, I see, young folks like yourself, young professionals that are really making a difference, an immediate impact to our area, and congratulations and thank you for that. And so, as some of these big projects and some of these things that you're involved in, is there anything that you could share with our listening audience that's going to say, well, what are we going to look like 5 years from now? Or, are we going to see more, trucks on the road? Are we going to see more congestion at the waterways, the railways? What's that plan? What's that forecast for us?
I think we got, at least speaking about freight, I think we have some really unique challenges ahead of us. If you just Google freight projections for the next 5 to 20 years, American consumers want more goods, and they want it cheaper, and they want it faster than ever before. And so we're having more goods coming in from overseas. We're having changes to our infrastructure, like the Panama Canal widening, the dredging of the Mississippi. So people are able to move bulk goods out of the United States and small goods in. And this leads to more and more truck traffic, more and more rail traffic. And that's going to increase. And people can get used to it, and just be okay with congestion, or we can start having this conversation that NIRPC is leading about doing a modal shift. How can we take more cars off the road and move them to buses and trains, or bicycles? How can we take more trucks off the road and moving that over to river barges, or trains that have a smaller biological footprint or carbon footprint per load carried than a truck does. And these are the things that we're looking at and we're examining really closely. I think that I'm really optimistic about Northwestern Indiana. I think that I think we're ahead of the conversation.
Wonderful.
And I think that we're going in a great place. And I think that, we've got a lot of really great energy in the region and a lot of support for things like transit. And I think that's becoming a really positive thing. And I'd love to see that continue.
Well, I noticed that at a lot of the public meetings that they're full. There's a lot of people that are interested, and everybody really does have a voice, and that's the one thing that, again, until we really got involved with a lot of the governmental agencies and working, is that as a citizen, I just didn't realize all the behind the scenes things and all the opportunities that we really had to express our opinions, to express input, to help with the change of our area. So any comments from you, Sarah, on the future of Northern Indiana?
Oh, just that I'd like to echo your point about being involved. That I think that we are, the 2040 plan, for example, was the product of years of outreach. And that outreach is very important towards our goals. And so if you are interested in what we're doing, please stay, keep your ear to the ground, listen about what we're doing, and please, we want to hear your comments. We want to hear what you have to say. We take this very seriously, and that Northwestern Indiana's future belongs to all of us, and that if we work together, we really can do something great.
Very well said, Sarah. Very well said. Any closing thoughts as we're wrapping up our show?
Really what we wanted to convey to your listeners is that if you have a data need, or if you have a question that seems too complicated, and you just want a little bit of help or support, just give us a call. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. If it's too big, we'll tell you it's too big.
Okay.
But we'll help talk through a few solutions for you.
Sure. We're with the government. We're here to help, right? I mean, I've heard that before, but you sincerely, again, I think all the activities that are really going on, very, very positive throughout NIRPC. And, it's just, like I said, it's just exciting to see young professionals as yourself really come into in people listening about sustainability and about green and about, new types of things. And, so we're just excited not only for your future, but the future of Northwest Indiana. And thanks for being here today. So
thank you.
Well, that will do it for today's edition of the Green Radio Network. I'm your host, Carl Lissick. Thanks again to our guests, James and Sarah of NIRPC. And be sure to join us again on WIMS Radio and Girard Media for the next edition of the Green Radio Network. And visit us online at southshorecleancities.org. And remember, it's never too late to begin your environmental legacy. Thank you, everybody.